Well, hello. Good to have you here. Now that you're here, come think with me about a passage and what the revelation is in it. The passage is in Genesis chapter 21, and it's verses 22 to 34. It's not really a long passage, but it's an interesting passage, and I have to tell you, I don't have it fully baked yet. I can't get my mind around the issues, the revelation, and get them encapsulated like I like to do. So think with me about it. Here's what it says. Genesis chapter 21, starting at verse 22. At that time, Abimelech and Phicol, the commander of his forces, said to Abraham, God is with you in everything you do. Now, swear to me here before God that you will not deal falsely with me or my children or my descendants. Show to me and the country where you are living as an alien the same kindness I have shown to you. Abraham said, I swear it. Then Abraham complained to Abimelech about a well of water that Abimelech's servants had seized. But Abimelech said, I don't know who has done this. You did not tell me, and I heard about it only today. So Abraham brought sheep and cattle and gave them to Abimelech, and the two men made a treaty. We could use the word covenant there. Abraham set apart 7 ewe lambs from the flock, and Abimelech asked Abraham, what is the meaning of these 7 ewe lambs you have set apart by themselves? He replied, accept these 7 lambs from my hand as a witness that I dug this well. So that place was called Beersheba, because the 2 men swore an oath there, made a covenant there. After the treaty had been made at Beersheba, Abimelech and Phicol, the commander of his forces, returned to the land of the Philistines. Abraham planted a tamarisk tree. They believe that that's the pistachio tree in Beersheba. And there he called upon the name of the Lord, the eternal God. And Abraham stayed in the land of the Philistines for a long time. Oh my. Well, okay. My commitment is that this is not just history. The history is accurate, but it's not a history book. This is revelation. It is God trying to show us something, say something to us, get us to see some things that otherwise we might not. So the question is, what are the issues? And so it looks to me like that in this passage, there are 3 big issues. Now there may be more, but I see 3 anyway. The first one has to do with a water well that was lost and is being redeemed. Now, that's big, and I could dig at it for a long time. I'm just not sure that what I'm seeing is exactly the way it ought to look. Secondly, it has to do with an oath between a Jew and a Gentile. So Abraham is a Jew, and Abimelech is a Gentile, and we're going to make a covenant between the two of them. The third thing has to do with the elements of covenant. So the word covenant and the number 7 are the same word in Hebrew. So it could be the well of 7, or it's the well of an oath. And so we'll want to take a look at that. Nonetheless, it seems that there's a long-term solution to a short-term problem. And the agreement, the covenant that Abraham and Abimelech entered that day about a well, has remained to this day. The well is still called Abraham's well. And it's no longer just used by Philistines, or in a broader sense, the people who follow the Islam religion, but it is a shared well, and it is open to anyone who comes to drink. That's not typical in the Islamic world. They don't share their water. So here's a map of the area, and it is always kind of interesting to think about this southern Israel. And you see some of the tribes, Dan, Ephraim, Benjamin. Benjamin is just a little tiny one. Jerusalem is in the tribal allotment of Benjamin, and Bethlehem is in the tribal allotment of Judah. Now that's a big deal. Book of Mormon says that Jesus was born in Jerusalem, and they say, well, it's just a bedroom community of Bethlehem. Well, wait a minute. It has to be accurate. And you see, Jerusalem's in the tribal allotment of Benjamin, and Bethlehem is of Judea. That's big. That's big. That's important. Now, Simeon has a little tribe, an area down here in the desert area, and that's where Beersheba is. That's also where the water source at Kadesh Barnea is. And then Abimelech was a king of Gerar over here, one of the 5 big Philistine cities, and he's Philistine. Abraham is living in Philistine territory. It must have spilled over a little back in those days. Nonetheless, that's a look at it. So Abraham has been staying somewhere in this area that I have circled in red, and he's been living, and he's going to live a long time and enjoy access to the well he dug at Beersheba. I mentioned Kadesh Barnea. Kadesh Barnea is the place of is a holy desert place. That's what the word Kadesh means, holy, and Barnea is in the desert. So it's a major camel stop. I was there a few years ago, and it's amazing. They have ways of collecting water and storing them underground, and if it only rains every 5 years, they've got enough. If it only rains every 7 years, they've got enough to water all the camels and all the people. And apparently the Israelites even bought water from them when they were in Kadesh Barnea. It is central to the spice and the silk trails of that day, and we don't read much about them. We don't read about them in the Bible, but they were big factors back in the day. So, this holy place in the desert of wandering is a significant place in the Bible. It shows up. It's the place where Abraham fought the Amalekites. Now, this is before they were a problem in the Exodus. And then later there's going to be a story about spies leaving from this area. It is near here, perhaps Kadesh Barnea, hard to know, but at least near here, where Hagar met the angel of the Lord after she ran away from Abraham and Sarah. This is the place where Miriam died and was buried, and the story is found in Numbers chapter 20. This is the place from which the 12 scouts, 10 of which came back with a bad report, 2 came back with a good report. Stories found in Numbers chapter 13. So in this passage we read that Abraham and Abimelech have another encounter. In a previous encounter, Abraham had lied about his wife, and it had affected Abimelech, and Abimelech heard the voice of God and corrected the situation. He's king of Gerar, and they've been excavating in recent years this mound that was the ancient city of Gerar. And apparently it existed between 2000 and 1500 BC. It's the time that Abraham was there. And Abraham is living off in this area. Anyway, here's Beersheba, and there where the star is Gerar. So we're going to talk about Beersheba, which means well of the oath, or could mean well of 7, because it's the same place. Now, I was there in 1968, and it was one of the dirtiest, most unsanitary places I've ever been. Flies were everywhere. And it was unbelievable how unkempt the people were not, they were not careful about their personal hygiene. And I was just absolutely shocked. I've seen poverty. I've lived in places where people are dirt poor, but generally they have a cleanliness about their person that doesn't reflect the filth around them. And of course, it was typically an Arab community back in the day when I was there. Camels were around and still are. There are still camels in the area. Now, the story has to do with the Philistia and a king who is a Philistine, and Abraham living in the area of the Philistines. So Philistia means to roll or wallow. It's used of wallowing in ashes when one repents. And Canaan, on the other hand, is one of the descendants of Noah, and it means beloved. So beloved and wallowing, kind of an interesting contrast there. But it's interesting that Bible characters show up in this area. Besides Abraham, we read about Isaac in Genesis 26 and Jacob in Genesis 46. They're living here in this desert area and digging wells, and again, issues about wells are in the story. This is where the story of Hagar and her encounter with the angel of God, or perhaps with God. This is where Elijah runs off to after the Mount Carmel victory. And so it's an important place in the Bible in many ways and keeps popping up. It was at Beersheba that Samuel's two wicked sons served in the tabernacle, and it was here that Israel demanded a king from the prophet Samuel. And the passage has several things in it. And one of the things that floats out of this passage that I see is both respect and distrust. See, Abimelech comes and he's been lied to. So he comes to say to Abraham, look, be honest with me now. Don't deceive me again. And live here extend the same kindness to me that I've extended to you. It's kind of interesting. That's quite a thing. And incidentally, he brings his army general, Phicol, with him. And the whole army may have come. Now, Abraham he's a big man. He's a somebody. He has lots of servants. He was able to muster an army. And so he could be intimidating. Phicol, on the other hand, was a king, and he had an army. And so here we have what they call two big dogs on the same block. And after Abimelech expresses his distrust for Abraham and asks that he will swear to him that he will treat his people with kindness and compassion, Abraham complains that his well has been seized by Abimelech's herdsmen. Now, Abimelech is interesting. Abimelech says, look, I've not heard of this until today. This is the first time I've heard about this. And he deals with it in the day he hears it. That's a biblical principle, incidentally. And if any of us and all of us will deal with issues in the day we hear of them, it's amazing how they don't blow up in our face. If we wait a week after we hear about it, it can blow up in our face. And the issue may have been going on for a long time. That doesn't matter. What matters is to deal with issues in the day you hear of them. Now, there seems to be peace that is enjoyed by the Philistines and the tribe that Abraham is in charge of here. And I have to tell you, it looks like that real peace has some underlying foundations. So it rests on things like honesty, trust, and agreement. And in Hebrew, the word shalom is more than just the absence of conflict. It is everything that is for your good and well-being. And the question then that I would ask is it possible for Jews and Gentiles to live together harmoniously? And it was back here. And if it was back here, it could be again. And it may be that there will be a day when God will bring a unity among the sons, the descendants of Abraham again. It's also important to have peace between man and God. And the story is about a covenant. Now, in the Old Testament, we hear about the Abrahamic covenant. That is with God and Abraham's descendants. In the New Testament, Jesus speaks of a new covenant. It's a new oath, but not only does it involve loving our fellow man as ourself, it seems to involve loving God the way we ought as well. And so it seems to me that covenant relationships can bring about harmonious or peaceful living. Peace in the sense of shalom. I have been to Abraham's well a couple of times, and here's the way it looks today. You can look down in there, but if you just take a gander, you cannot see the bottom. It's a long ways down. It's 400 feet deep. But the name of it, Beersheba, can mean well of the oaths, or it can mean the well of seven. And so what is the original meaning? Well, both. And they're both here, and we need to look at both of them. It has to do with the source of water, and water is the symbol of life. So Moses and children of Israel have a problem with water a couple of times, and God talks to him about a rock. In the New Testament, we read that rock is Jesus Christ, and we sing a song, "On Christ, the solid rock I stand," and water flows from the rock. On one of the feast days, it's the feast of Pentecost, actually, Jesus stands and says, "Whoever drinks from the water I will give will never be thirsty again. The water that I give will become in those who drink a spring of water that bubbles into eternal life." Oh, there's a lot of symbolism there about the feast day, and I'm not going to go into that one in this moment. Just to reference that water and the source of water, the wells of salvation, and salvation centers around the concept of a covenant. So all of that is here in this picture. So Abimelech and Phicol from the land of the Philistines come together. Incidentally, Abimelech means my father is king, and Phicol means great. And so we have these names, and they've got to fit into the revelation somehow. I'm not sure I have all handle on all that. But the incident happens. That's what's called the well of the oath, Beersheba. I want you to notice on the picture on the right, an altar. Because you see, Abraham is an altar builder. And when the incident is done, he worships God. Again, a reference to an altar and worship. And so Abraham builds altars wherever he goes, and he takes time to worship God. Later, Isaac and Jacob become altar builders as well. Back to the well of Beersheba. It has a cover over it today, so that, I guess so people won't drop their phone down in there, but don't drop their bag, their backpack in it or fall in it. And it's over 400 feet deep. It's just absolutely an amazing place. And the interesting thing is they started digging on a mound. And the valley there, the dry creek bed, is 200 feet below the top of the well. And the bottom of the well is another 200 feet down. Now, this was a hand-dug well. Imagine digging by hand a well that is 400 feet deep. It's a famous well, and it has good water and has been a source of water down through the ages now for 4,000 years. While it's there happened to be a train of camels that came galloping through, and it was kind of fun to see them, and I captured their picture. I actually have it on a video. So the word in Hebrew, Shiva, which is translated oath, or sometimes covenant, also means seven. And seven is the symbol of perfection, fullness. So I want you to understand this concept of covenant has the key ingredients in it of something that is full or perfect, complete in a biblical sense. But the seven and the oath of seven, always with seven, the seven guarantees the fullness of God's blessing. It means that we will carry out to the letter our word. And God has given his word. To Noah, he gave his word and witnessed it with a rainbow that he would not destroy the earth again. Back in the day of creation, in 6 days God created, and then on the seventh he rested. He rested, not because he was tired. It has to do with this shalom, this peace, this harmony. And the 7, a day to stop toiling and to enjoy the presence of our Creator, is the promise of the fullness of that kind of thing. So 7, man is to work 6 days, but on the 7th he is to rest. It is God's promise, according to Hebrew, of an eternal rest. And then every 7 years there was to be a sabbatical. And again, there is some symbolism and there is a typology there, and the picture of a year of rest. And a year is, Jesus said that a day is as 1,000 years and 1,000 years as a day. So long time anyway. And we have to step out of time to understand some of this stuff. We read the story of Joseph in Egypt, and he administered the years of plenty for 7 years and stored food. And then he administered the years of famine, 7 years, and handed out the food so that the people did not starve. Oh, the menorah also has 7 branches. It has 7 cups. It has 7 buds. It has 7 flowers. My goodness, it's just absolutely amazing. And then there are the 7 churches of Revelation. What I want to tell you is that this 7 shows up in the Bible as a symbol of perfection or completeness, fullness. And God is often saying, I will give you my word. And he does it in a covenant, a 7. And the 7 is the symbol that he will fulfill his word completely. And we can take it to the bank, so to speak. I have been, like I tell you, there a couple of times, and this is an aerial view of the Tel Beersheba. This is the mound of ruins, and they've been excavating it for a long time. It's a delight to walk around and see the things. And when I was first there years ago, there is water in the area, but it dries up. It's not always predictable, and it was a barren, desolate wasteland when I was there. Today, it is a thriving city, a modern city. And what I want you to know is the Bible says that the desert will blossom like the rose. And it's a promise of God, and he is fulfilling it everywhere in Israel. It's amazing. There's a funny thing. Israel owns all the land except what was deeded before 1948 when it became a nation. And so they lease for 49 years because of the year of Jubilee. They lease for 49 years, and then the property returns to the state. So given that, people have been hesitant to invest in hotels. So there's only one hotel in this entire big city of Beersheba. And you have to make reservations more than a year in advance if you take a group there, to be able to stay in a hotel. I don't know where else you'd stay. Maybe move in with a Bedouin in a tent or something. But there is discussion about building another hotel or two. But whoever does it has to cover their costs, and they have to be able to reap a profit within the 49 years. Now, not that that's impossible, but it'll take some kind of Jewish skill at handling money and administering it. Anyway, so Abraham made an oath with Abimelech here in this place, and there's some of the sheep. Also talks about cows. Earlier, there had been the gifting of silver to Sarai as kind of taking away the shame that had been caused, some of that stuff. So again, here's the well of Beersheba, the well of the oath, or the well of 7. And originally it looked kind of like this. Today it has a covering. And also an interesting thing, there was an altar there, and Abraham built an altar. And the instructions in the Old Testament are that they are to be built of unhewn stones. And here's one, however, that is of hewn stones. But what's interesting is that it has 4 horns. It has horns on the corners. And a horn is a symbol of strength, but it's on the 4 corners. It's kind of interesting about the 4 corners of the altar. And 4, it has symbolic meaning in Hebrew. And so here we are, the 4 corners. And I don't know whether you've ever taken a good look at it or not, but the cross, the symbol that we use for the atonement, is a cross. And it has 4 corners. Don't look at the outside, look at the inside. There are 4 corners on the inside. And I want you to notice that the difference between the Old Covenant is that the Old Covenant dealt with outer things. Things like discord and things like a water well that had been seized. And they were external things. But the New Covenant deals with internal things. So the corners are on the inside. Just an aside, but always interesting little insights that float. So the themes reflected in this story involve God had called Abraham from his home and from his family, and Abraham packed his bags and took all of his servants and his family with him. He didn't have any children at the time. And God had promised Abraham all the land that his feet touched. That's never been fulfilled. It's still called the Promised Land. But Abraham lived most of his life in tents as a stranger in the land, as an alien, it says. And he was respected and admired. He was looked upon as a prophet, a man of God who enjoyed God's blessing. Incidentally, Isaac was born in a foreign country. And all of this because God had promised to bless the Gentiles through Abraham. So Abraham interfaces with Gentiles many times in the story of his lifetime. Now, God has promised a land. It's called the Promised Land. And it's not anymore, in the New Testament, we're not looking toward Israel, the land of Israel. Neither was Abraham. The book of Hebrews says that he was looking for a city not built with human hands. Well, like Abraham, you and I live as pilgrims in a foreign land. And we will have to deal with unbelievers, Gentiles, just like Abraham did. We are to bless them as Abraham was. Well, these are just some of the things that I see in a passage like this. And like I said from the outset, I don't have it fully wrapped up yet. I can't quite encapsulate all of it, but they're there. And they're big, and think about them for a while. And if you get a good insight, communicate it to me. I'd be delighted to round this out and button it up in a neat and tidy way. Thank you for joining me today. May God bless you. And join me again next week for another one. See you then. Goodbye.